Welcome to AMIcast, podcast about Amiga computers. I'm your host, Krzysztof Radzikowski, but call me Krzysztof or Radzik.
Welcome in episode 20. It will be 20 of AMIcast, and this is the dream are coming come true. To me, I have the special guest like always, but this is special guest, Trevor Dickinson. So Amiga father now, I can say. And hi, how are you? And we are here in Amiga Ireland MeetUp. So
thanks, Krzysztof. Thanks for inviting me. I know you've been trying to get me for a while.
Yeah.
I live in New Zealand these days, and its time zones are not good. But it's nice to be here. It's nice to finally meet you, and it's really good. It's a nice little show, isn't it?
It's very, very nice, and I think the third edition next year will be even more popular because for the example of you or Mike from Colanto, or there's a lot of great guys, and I will be more. I think the one stuff is we can see at the show the X1000 and the new X5000 after, let's say, too much years of waiting. But is available, and what you can say to make it easy, what you can say about this computer, because I already own this and I'm really happy. I prepared a book about this computer, and in my opinion there are some limitations, of course, but it's the best Amiga in my life.
Oh, thank you very much. That's nice to hear. Of course, the X1000, the Amiga, I have to give it this full title, the AmigaOne X5000, because that's exactly what it is. It's an Amiga One. I put my heart and soul and life into that one, and so I really wanted to have a new Amiga. So for me, that was the culmination of a dream. So when we actually got it to market, I was really pleased. The X5000 was the follow-on from that, because I saw there was demand for high-end Amigas, even though they're expensive. And they're expensive not because we're making money, they're expensive because they're made in small volumes, and the costs of small volume manufacturing is really expensive.
Yeah.
And small volume development, it's really expensive. So, but having said all that, I use my X5000 every day now. It's become my preferred machine. It's fast, it's stable, it's a great machine. I mean, I still use my X1000, have them both side by side, but my go-to machine now on the Amiga side is my X5000, my AmigaOne X5000.
X5000, but at the end of all, this is the, let's say, official name of
yes.
Next generation Amiga. So
yes, at the moment, that's what you've got to call it. The limitations are, I think, mainly due to the early release of the operating system. It's called pre-release,
yes.
And it's pre-release AmigaOS 4.1 update, final edition, update 1. But it's quite funny because when I got many years ago, I bought a boat. It's quite a big boat. And I called it Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
My wife said, "This is your Final Fantasy." I said, "No, there's Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4.
At the end of all, when you have some years ago, the Windows XP had the updates, and for me, it's okay. The name maybe is funny, but at the end of all, the good that somebody is making the progress of OS.
Yes.
So I don't care about the name. I would like to see 4.2, of course.
Yeah, I think we all would like to see 4.2.
Yeah.
I want to see multi-core support.
It will be a lot of. I see in the X5000 there's a lot of power, because when I started writing the book, this was 3 weeks of heavy work on this Amiga, and I think you can almost do almost every task of everyday use because of power, but in multi-cores it will be better.
Yeah, don't forget we have quite an active, it's an Amiga, it's an Amiga One, but we have a very active Linux group that work on it, and they run AmigaOS, but they also run Linux. And Linux, they've got full access to the multi-core and all the other range of Linux software, which is useful and it's good, but obviously we didn't design it for Linux, we designed it for AmigaOS.
Okay, so some details, because what is missing in the X5000 completely system, there is not quick start manual, there is no manual, there is only technical reference, and for example this partition setup, in my opinion, is not so nice. I don't know what I can advise to you, but in my opinion it will be nice when you can buy like a Mac. I plug in and nothing interesting.
I suppose that the difference between the X1000 and an X5000 is when I was doing the X1000, and we did produce a quick start manual, and we did include the AmigaOS 4 booklet. I have to be honest, even that booklet was a little confusing, I thought, which we didn't produce, it was available already, and it wasn't clear. This time around, of course, we're using resellers to create their own systems and put them out. So it's up to these are the first releases, that's why it's called Close Encounters, playing on the space theme like First Contact. So I would expect over the period that this will improve, but the first systems under the Close Encounters are getting pre-release software, and the retailers are learning their trade, to be honest, because they are setting their systems up.
Okay, so I hope this situation with sound cards will be as well better. This is not your fault, but just to be honest. Just so you're clear,
the sound card, we've never had an issue with sound cards, and then of course some of the retailers bought the sound cards and they got earlier models, but of course the AmigaOS and those sound cards are problematic in Linux and
they are
PC.
Problematic everywhere.
But at least we know there's an issue now, so we can advise the resellers, the retailers, that they need to check the sound cards they get and they've got the right model numbers.
Okay, so there is a chance that the computer will be easier to buy, because when you check the websites, the releasers or this stuff, it's always not available or something. It will be to be announced, and this is a little bit confusing because you can buy it, but you cannot at the end of all.
Well, I think the issue is more to do with, it's probably my fault, and I'm going to own up to this one. I was very keen that we had lots of resellers, not just one, because one reseller becomes a bottleneck.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened is that the Amiga Kit, who is the main reseller, what they've done is they've supplied all the resellers, and so are not selling themselves.
Yeah.
So we need to resolve that issue so that AmigaKit are actually selling as well, because they're one of the main, if not the main reseller.
Okay.
So that's something we have to resolve. I know it's a problem. I can see it's a problem.
Yeah, because the demand, I think, is quite big, because the price at least is high, of course, but it's 700 euros lower than it was before, so it's nice.
Yeah.
2000 and I paid 2,300. So in my opinion, the pain limit is 2,000, but 2,003 you can live. It's better than 3,000. So,
and of course, with the Brexit vote, in sterling, it's very, very inexpensive.
Okay, and today you say something more about the Tabor, and this is really important, I think, for community.
Really exciting for me. I went to a meeting in Brussels with the Hyperion management and developers. I met with Timothy de Groot and the Frieden brothers, Thomas and Hans Jörg, and Skyped in with Kostel, who is also a fellow director. But I was most excited by the fact that Timothy, he's had a Tabor board, which is part of the new AmigaOne A1222. He's had that for quite some time, and following some completion work on the kernel by the Friedens, which was done once the X5000 was finished.
Yep.
So that's some of the delays. He had a working system. That's the first time I've seen it.
So now it's not on a workbench. You can do something.
You can do something, and there's obviously little issues, but I was running, for example, the Warp 3D cow demo, for example.
I saw this on Facebook.
And I ran Personal Paint I used AmiStore to download the enhancer pack. I installed the enhancer pack. So I was doing, real things that users do, not just, developers. So I was really pleasantly surprised. It needs to be tweaked and optimized, but generally it's coming along. Obviously drivers are always an issue, and the onboard Ethernet needs to be done by the developer. Onboard sound needs to be done by the developer. But as a system, up until now, it's only run Linux. Run it very well. But all the Linux guys, all the beta testers have had the opportunity of running Linux, and they've been running Linux on it. So we know the hardware's good, we know it works. There's no surprises. That's good. But again, we did it for Amiga OS. We didn't do it for Linux. It's just fortunate we have Linux. We can test it.
Okay, so this means this is possible in this year we will.
Oh yeah,
because
it has to be.
I made only in Polish language because I know I make the website Polish English, but summary of the year. So in my opinion, the really bad situation is that we cannot get Tabor now, and I think the limit is this year because as you presented on AmigaOS, the price is 400, I think, euros plus tax or something like that. But this is much more. This is 4 times slower than.
Well, but with Amiga OS, it really isn't slower. Do you mean
lower,
it is?
Lower.
Yeah, lower. Yes,
lower probably.
Sorry, it's a lot lower. You're right. Yeah. But we're not stopping there. We still got developments. We still have other plans and other irons in the fire. So the main thing now, though, is to get the Tabor out, and I want it out this year. We definitely need to be selling with all our resellers the AmigaOne X5000 because we have a warehouse full of them. It's all been paid for, and we need to get the money, recoup the money from what we've paid, so we can put it into other developments.
Okay. So now the question, for example, for me, the software from AO side, because you made some software now, and then for Classic, I think that it makes sense because, in my opinion, in Classic there are money. In NG is not so popular and divided. But natural question about Odyssey web browser or other browser. Please tell me that you pay somebody that make new browser for us.
We need to work on the browser, don't we? Because it's desperately needed.
It's 4 years old.
Yeah, and I actually am impressed by the work that's been done on Odyssey, and it's done much more. I mean, Net Surface coming along, but Timberwolf was looking very good, and maybe that needs to be picked up again and driven. I don't know, but we desperately need a modern working network, and I totally agree with you.
Okay, because when I make this book about the X5000, I use a lot of Odyssey to use Microsoft Office, to use Facebook or Messenger from Facebook. This is easy to contact. But not every website is working or was working 2 months ago. Now it's stopped.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, if we want to bring AmigaNG to, let's say, every home, we need at least browser because
I think it's a crucial part of the system of the software, and I know other people who are involved in OS4 think the same. So it's something that we've got to work on.
Okay.
It's a priority to me. It's one of the priorities.
Please, only you can save us.
No, there are lots of good people who are working very hard. I mean, I'm pleased I can contribute to that. But we need to work together as teams, not apart and separate.
Yeah, this is I think the browser or other software. This is the problem that only one guy is going to make development of something, and one guy is not enough. And if something happens, the guy disappears, like the FAT from the Odyssey. Nothing, 4 years without nothing. So this is okay, but So I hope the browser will be better soon. So about the public relations, maybe, because a lot of guys complaining about maybe more high pay in public relations or lack of public relations, and the AO has quite good name. And do you think you can make invest or force something like Hyperion to make more public relations?
Okay.
Go to people.
Well, you can't force independent companies to do anything. To be honest, they have to do what they do. But I think from my discussions with the Hyperion principals, that they want to be able. I think some changes have happened for the good, and they are looking more to do better public relations going forward. So I hope to see some improvements there. I think public relations is very important, or at least interacting with the user base. So, and I try to do that, a lot. And I visit a lot of shows because I enjoy them as well. And that's why I go. But I think the PR side, social media interaction with the user is really important.
If we want to have even more new users or something, because the professional videos from YouTube, this will be easier for us to spread the news of Amiga is still kicking.
Yeah.
So something like tough question, because there are a lot of suggestions that Aeon should buy Hyperion.
Well, it's an independent company again, right?
Yeah. But the basic for this is that a lot of users are not happy with Hyperion, lack of peer information. That's why you have to get a good name.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to work closely with Hyperion because it's in our best interest that for the community and for the business and for the future that we have good support and good collaboration. So it's a good question. It's a tough question, but I'm the last 12 months I'm doing my best to work more closely. So I think it's important that we improve relationships with all the companies. I mean, I'm quite keen to have a good relationship with the MorphOS people. I'm keen to have a good relationship with the AROS people. I'm keen to have a good relationship with Amiga Inc. Because I think if we could, it's a dream of mine to try and bring it all back together again.
This was my next question. Do you think we can be again united, because it will be easier for everybody, for users? Maybe not. I know. I'm making the podcast. I start to attend some shows, so I meet the guys, and I know some guys from, for example, MorphOS scene are not happy with OS 4 scene, and so on. And between this AROS, it's small, but is there, and the Classic is more powerful. But if we are united, or if we can in main situation work together like Odyssey, it is better for everybody.
Well, it's better if you can use because there's limited resources, technical resources throughout the Amiga world. If people are willing to produce their work, their software, their effort for all of the platforms. I think Hollywood's a very good example. I mean, Hollywood, all right, it looks after Windows and Android as well now, but it covers, Classic, Next Generation, MorphOS, AROS, it covers everything. So I think, more of that approach, and I'd like to see more of the developments that do that.
Okay, this is nice, but the good natural question about Hollywood, because I'm a big fan of Hollywood, but I cannot write a code or something. I use Designer. I even make this application for my podcast. It was working. So, there was some topic about the playfield from iOS, that you can learn the code. My question is, if you can maybe sponsor a book about Hollywood language, not design. Design is easy. Because I already tried to read this documentation. It's very good documentation in Hollywood. But this is 800 of dry information. So if you are not coding, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I cheat. I take some of his existing examples and I adapt them.
Yeah, but
I don't know how to write the code either.
Exactly. But if because I think the Hollywood is one of the best applications for Amiga, and you can. Maybe some application, not everything you can write in it. So if can somebody spread the news, sponsor the book, how to code in this. So like Amos was for Amiga in all days, everybody could work in Amos. Yeah?
When you see software for other platforms, all their manuals now tend to be PDFs or digital. Is it digital you're thinking of, or a hard copy?
For me, I always prefer digital, but some guys, I think in Amiga world, I have the contact with Polish publisher that makes my books. he knows that the Amiga guys like the hard stuff, yeah?
Yeah, well,
stuff.
they like the, yeah.
But at the end of all, in my opinion, it's whatever, if it can be PDF, but if somebody can do it, because I understand that Andreas have no time to write the tutorials.
And it's tutorials, it's what you're talking about.
I'm talking about tutorials. The best way is, as I see this, let's make a game. And we start the game from point 0 to the point 8. And the guy that is reading this can learn this. I know how I learned Lightwave 20 years ago because of tutorials or something. Yeah? And this is the best way because information is too much, you cannot learn. Yeah? So, and you are something like Amiga Angel as well. So that's why I'm asking you, because we are lack of the cash in our community as well.
Yeah, that's one of the problems we have, and that obviously we're very spread out. We're worldwide, but it's still quite small and quite specialised. I mean, I'd like to see a Hollywood manual. I've done it by just, as I say, copying what he's done before and altering myself a little bit, just so you can do it. But tutorials is probably the best way to go. So anyway, but let me think about that one.
Okay, so another maybe question about the classic, because other way. What I see on the Amiga market now, your company or the red camp, the blue camp, this is Morpheus. It looks like the Morpheus is start to die. It's, in my opinion, end user, no contact, no information. Looks they are going down. This means your approach to make it a little bit, because I understand you want to make a little bit in commercial way this OS4 situation is winning, or this is good approach in my opinion. Yeah? But I think the most money is in classic. And you said you want to bring some software for classic. So do you want to invest in the classic direction
we are.
Some money?
We are investing in the classic direction. I mean, it's taken a while to come out. The hardware's been available for a long time, but the Prisma Megamix card is now out. That's for classic.
Yeah. And this is another tough question. Why there is no advanced AHI drivers, because after so many years this is disaster, yeah?
Well, what slowed this Prisma card coming out was the lack of drivers, or the lack of stable drivers, and so I'm not involved in running that project, but it's run by Matthew Lehman, and he commissioned some developers in Germany. They've done a really good job, so that's continuing. So you'd expect to see more upgrades and improvements to that, along with drivers and GUIs and GUIs, interfaces. So that's not finished. It's just the first release.
Okay, so at the end of all this means we will get more classic hardware from Aeon, or?
Yes, definitely. More and more bespoke hardware and ideas. Aeon and Amiga Kit. Amiga Kit's working a lot of hardware, and also software. The Enhancer software pack is quite a massive amount of software, and the vast majority, the recent released SE version, most of that's going to work on classic as well. And there'll be a classic version coming out. I imagine with the next release that comes out, 1.23 will include, should include OS classic version.
Okay, so, and this means I think you are in a really good relationship with Jan from AmiKit, because your next project, Alice.
Yeah, well, Alice was my dream actually, many years ago.
When we can buy it, because it's...
well, what we've done is that we did a deal with Alex Perez. He has a company, a small company in the States, and why I can't remember its name, I apologise, Alex. And he's going to do a test launch of Alex for the US and European markets, Alice laptops, and he's actually invested into doing that, spent money to do it. So I've got and Jan from AmiKit's been involved. He's really helped a lot. especially with the AmiKit version.
Yeah.
So Alice is, it's AmiKit, that just boots into AmiKit, but has a rabbit hole feature that runs Linux programs. We've got obviously Windows, and obviously we've got OS4 Classic. But Windows has the new version of WinUE, which has the new Classic as well, so that's got better memory, better graphics, and I've installed Enhancer on that. So the Enhancer SE version installs quite well into that. A few little glitches, but looking quite good. So the Alice was my attempt to, and I wanted it many years ago, and I called it Eliza then. I don't know why I called it Eliza, but I turned it to Alice because I could play on the words, an Amiga laptop, or a laptop incorporating the Classic experience. Because what I really want is a PowerPC laptop, but I'll stick with Alice for the moment.
Okay. So, and when it will be available?
Well, I expected it to be available after AmiWest, but this time it takes, and of course Alex has a full-time job. He's like everyone has. His side company, his small company, he's doing lots of Classic stuff, little Classic bits and pieces, hardware, and so he's fully invested in the Classic side.
Okay, so
I'm confident that it shouldn't be too much longer.
So the next maybe let's move to the software and we'll can start to finish maybe because I can ask you all day, but the LibreOffice, when it will be available?
Yeah, right.
Which version is this?
Well, it's like all these things. You can keep working on it. I commissioned the Freedom Brothers. They're both working on it for me, and we had a version just after AmiWest, which we thought would be the version we went out to beta testers with, and I started asking for beta test volunteers. They've made one or two other changes so we can have a better experience for the beta testers. So I'm expecting that. Well, I was expecting it last month, Christmas. So I would expect within the next month we'll be putting the LibreOffice beta test out and running, so that we get some feedback. So in our meeting in Brussels this week, we agreed we would have a separate server, a Mantis bug tracker for Aeon to use, and then link to their full server for their own internal work. So we're organising how we're going to do the beta test at the moment.
Okay. And the initiatives, you said that this is the
I want all of those. See, I want updated versions of MSX, Aladdin, all the ones we bought. We bought them to you. Octomed's been worked on, so I'm expecting that'll probably be first because we've actually had work ongoing with that. The other ones we need to take our resources because even though we've got 20 developers, they're all doing other things, so they're not full-time developers by any means, and it's only when they have time and are able to do the work. Okay. So that I expect to be slow. I think Octomed first, then the others will look at.
And the AmiStore, because I suppose the AmiStore should be available for other systems as well, the Classic and MorphOS, or not? I
want to see AmiStore available on everything, but of course it's written in Hollywood.
Yeah. That's why it's theoretically easy support.
Yeah, so it should be easy support, but it needs some work on the interface to make sure it looks good or works on other platforms. It does run on Amiga Forever now. Except you can't download things because you need the security sorted out. It does run because it runs on the AmigaOS for Classic. So on Alice you can download. It will be supplied with the plan is to supply AmiStore with the next version of Enhancer software, so it'll always be on the disk.
In my opinion, this is quite good approach because it looks like Mac doing App Store, and this is easy to buy software.
Yeah, and so it's amazing because it's on your computer and you can go to it. It encourages you to buy. Which is good. And what we're finding is more and more developers are wanting to put their software on. Because
so how, if I am a developer, how I can put software there?
Well, first of all, you just contact Matthew Lehman and agree the price you're going to sell it for. what you're selling.
And you take some percentage?
There's a small percentage.
Okay.
It varies depending on how big the is. But we handle all the VAT for all over Europe, or non-VAT. We handle all the charges, we handle all the tracking, and we provide updates to the developers so they know exactly where they stand, what money they're earning, and they don't have to do anything other than get the money when it comes in.
Okay, so
And no handling in VAT, that's all handled. Because in Europe, you have to apply the VAT for the country that they're in, and that's all variable all over Europe.
Yeah, this is a good question. Maybe in future, can you give us the prices with tax? Because a lot of guys in Europe, when they say the X5000 will be 2,000, everybody, oh, mine's cheap, and then this is tax somewhere. Yeah?
Well, see, some countries there's no tax. So when we ship to this, actually the prices for the X5000 was including VAT, and so if you look at the advert, it says $16.99, or brackets 14 something without tax. So we've got the tax price in there. But AmiStore, I think, it's because the calculation's done. You don't know what the price is until you know what country.
This is not a big difference. This is the software is not so expensive at the end of all.
No, true. But you'll find that in some countries the tax rate's 19%, and some it's 23 or 24%.
Yeah.
So it varies. So you can't tell the price until you know what country they're checking out from.
Okay, good. So it was not so bad.
No, it's all right.
We
It's
can
good.
finish this.
You happy?
This is nice. And you will be in the noise, I think, yeah?
Yes, I will.
So
Yeah.
I can make an update.
That'll be good, yeah. That'll be great.
Yes, I'm really big fan of AmigaNG. I want to use it every day. I'm thankful that you are doing everything.
Well, it was quite interesting. When I first went to New Zealand, I had a PC which broke, and I had a micro A1C. And I had to write one of the articles for Amiga Future. And all I had was a micro A1C, not a laptop or anything else. So this is a few years ago. So I did the whole article on the micro A1C, and it surprisingly, I could do it.
After what I achieved with X5000 in the 3 weeks, I think you can do it a lot on our Amigas. One. But of course we need the browser. This is
the browser is the weak link for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I was very pleased about. I think the problem with the Timberwolf browser was that it was done to get to a certain level, and then it was
stopped or something.
because they had other work to do. So
maybe there's another question because a lot of guys as well say that we should switch to Intel. I was the fan of this approach, but when I analyzed everything, the guys saying that MorphOS team want to switch to AMD processor, so fuzzy Intel, and I think this for MorphOS is, in my opinion, this means they are dead because there's we don't have developers, so who will write again the whole software?
It's a difficult question because the first thing is the idea of switching to a platform that's readily available. What are you going to support? Are you going to support?
Only one like Apple do it.
Yeah, but it all changes every time it comes out. It changes. So
like this sound card from X5000,
exactly.
Is the same, but the revision is different.
They never stay. Yeah, exactly. So you're dead, and so you're always chasing yourself. So if you want to design a custom motherboard, x86, it'll be the same price. There's no difference. And so because if you want to have a system that doesn't change, that's yours, that you can control, so you can control what people are getting, so it's not changing every 5 minutes. Then you have the same problem with NREs being exactly the same. It's no cheaper. It doesn't help. One thing about next generation is generally, as long as the driver's available, the software, the cards all work. PCIe cards, PC cards, hard disk drives, CD-ROMs, SSDs. They all work.
Yes, this is true. And I forgot to ask you. Do you think we can use because now I think, I don't know in everywhere, but in Europe this retro movement, the retro scene
is big.
It's big. Can you use this? Because in my opinion you should try to use this retro movement to maybe ask the let's say North and South, when you have the game, the cult game for Amiga, to make a remake for this and use our Amiga One to be something between retro to not stay in the retro era. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm quite keen to get, which is not new games, unfortunately, but ports of existing games. Which I think that's important. Yeah, good remakes. It's much easier to do a port because you don't have to do all the audio, visual, graphics, whatever. And having now found out a lot more about games, speaking to Mike Clark and hearing John Hare, the amount of money that's put into developing games with no guarantee of success is almost worse than hardware.
Yeah.
And so even games like Angry Birds, which was a massive success, that was their 51st game, something like that, and they had investment from venture capitalists of hundreds of millions, at least tens of millions of dollars. But it took them 51 games to get the big one. Okay. So and they've got a big market they're aiming for. Yeah.
But the big market means this. It's not so easy to be on the top. If the market is smaller, it's not so easy to go to that. But theoretically, it's easy because it's not so big guys. The sharks are maybe 2 or 3, not 10,000 of them. Yeah?
But then again, you want to make lots of sales, and so you need a bigger market. And that's it's a catch-22. Where it's all about size, number of people, and cost. So it's always a balancing act, and it's been an interesting journey for me because obviously you have to spend way ahead of the return just to get into the market, just to get the hardware out or the software out, and that's what I've been doing actually.
Okay, so maybe last question.
Yeah.
Do you think in the, let's say, near future or something, our developers or core developers can have this situation that they can only live from Amiga? Because then it's, you know what I mean, then you are a full-time job, it's much more easier to make something.
Yeah, and if you're a full-time job, you can concentrate on it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible at the moment. Will it be possible in the future? I would say no, not really, because to be able to pay real development costs, developers are expensive.
Yeah, I know this.
And I just don't see it happening. But I do see it happening where they can have their day job and do their development on the side, and that's what's happened to most of our Daniel, exactly. He balances. We have a number of developers doing exactly that. They have a day job, which they're doing, and they're doing their Amiga development. It needs to be a much bigger market, overall market, for that to happen.
Okay, so I think the Tabor will do it this month.
That's my hope. That's my hope. But one thing that we are doing with Amiga Kit and Aeon is that the plan is for Aeon to acquire Amiga Kit, and that's the plan. Sometimes plans don't work out.
Yeah.
But the plan, and actually to put more people in the combined business, so more technical resource for hardware and for software. So we actually really focus on supporting our customers and getting more hardware out and getting more software out. So that is a plan that we have agreed and we have in place. Whether it happens or not, we'll ask me at Noise.
Okay.
We should know by then.
I think we'll finish now and we'll talk at Noise.
Okay, it's great.
I think I must ask you, can I put what you said in the way I record?
Yeah, of course you can.
Like first part of podcast.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
And then now I can add more details to this. So, okay.
To you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Amiga, birthday to you. You gonna blow it out? Go on. Yay!
Let's see, we'll find a place for this table just to get us have a slice. There'll be a knife and a couple of napkins left beside to take a piece of Amiga.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a short talk now, a little bit about my background and why I'm involved with Amigas and why I like Amigas and why I'm a nut. And then I'll try and keep it short, and then you can ask questions, because I always think interactive talks and presentations are much better. But I heard John Hare saying that 30 years. it's quite embarrassing for me, really, because I'm probably the oldest person in the room apart from David Pleasance, and he's not here, so that's good. So I am the oldest person in the room. I actually got involved with Commodore computers back in 1978, 1979, and it was a Commodore PET. And if you think back now, who would think I'd be sharing at a presentation with David Pleasance, who was became the joint managing director of Commodore UK, and also we have John Hare, who was on the Skype, and obviously one of my heroes from the early software days. We've also got Mike Clark here, who was one of my other hero companies, Psygnosis, one of the best game companies I think that came out of the UK. And it's just really, and we've got Michael Batlana, and I guess he's not here either. And Michael was the reasons I got involved with, eventually, the reason I got involved with Aon. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So back in 1979, I got my first home computer. It was actually a business computer because I wanted to teach myself programming, because I'd been promoted to a job I couldn't do. Typical, isn't it? You get a job you can't do. So I thought, these guys are pulling the wool over my head. I can't do it. So I got a Commodore PET. I taught myself BASIC. I taught myself peeks and pokes. I taught myself a machine code language. And computing in those days, there weren't home computers. You tell kids today, and they don't believe you. But there weren't home computers. There weren't smartphones. There weren't tablets. There weren't PCs even. Right? So. And David's in the room now, so I'm no longer the oldest person in the room. I feel good. So, as I said, you weren't in Dave. I was just saying, I really felt proud to be in the room with one of my early heroes, David Pleasance, and Michael. If he's back in now, yes, Michael's back in now. I will tell Michael's story later. So, I got involved in Commodore PETs, and it was fantastic. You were at the forefront of home computer technology. And then one day I was walking past a computer store in Aberdeen, Scotland. That's where I lived at the time. And I saw a Commodore 64 playing international soccer. And I thought, this is marvelous. It's got moving people. There's sound, there's color, there's two teams. There's matchstick men. It's great. So I said, I've got to have that. But at the time I couldn't afford to have that and the Commodore PET, so I traded in my Commodore PET and got a Commodore 64. Then I got a Commodore 128, then I got a Commodore 128D, and then I was living in America, living in Texas, and in a thunderstorm, lightning hit my house and destroyed the Commodore 128D, the whole system. But luckily
the D was destroyed.
Well, no, it was an act of God. Because my insurance policies at Acts of God were covered. So with the money, I bought an Amiga 2000. So my first Amiga was a big box Amiga, an Amiga 2000. And I was totally blown away by just everything about it. It was just such a fantastic machine. So then, and there's Amiga 3000, there was an Amiga 4000, and I used Amigas in my business. So I always used Amigas for desktop publishing, for graphics work, for video work, for all the publicity work, the company I was with at the time, for all the technical manuals. And I used that all the way through the 90s, up till about the end of the 90s. Things happen, Commodore go bust in 94, ESCOM go bust, Gateway don't want the Amiga, Amiga Inc. happens in the millennium. We can go through all the trials and tribulations of the post-Commodore era, but what was really exciting was I met Michael Batlana. Well, exciting, wasn't it? I was living in London at the time, and Michael has a technique of coming to places and finding local Amigans wherever they are, local Commodore people. And he came to London, and fortunately I managed to get into one of his meetings.
Early as usual. You were like 15 minutes early.
Story of my life. And so, Michael had arranged a dinner with some local Amiga guys, and I don't know if anyone remembers Total Amiga magazine. It was a really good magazine. The editor, Robert Williams, and his partner were invited to join Michael for dinner. fortunately, his partner couldn't join. So I've been, by this time, I was in London. I moved around a lot, you'll notice this. I was in London, and in my basement, I have started to put a little museum together with all the computers I bought, apart from my first pet, because I had to sell that. But the other ones I kept, and I put a little museum together, and I was starting to collect computers from eBay. So I managed to get friendly with Robert Williams, and we used to have Amiga days, Commodore days, and we'd go down to my basement, and we'd build things. We'd build Amathon systems, we'd repair stuff, we'd try and get stuff working. It was like in the Amiga world. And so I knew him. He said, look, my partner Mickey can't come, would you like to come and meet Michael? Oh, that'd be fine. So I got to meet Michael. It's a long story, this going round and round in circles. Got to meet Michael, and we became friends, and we became business partners to a certain extent. And I was on a trip with Michael to see Commodore gaming in the Netherlands. I wasn't going to see Commodore gaming, Michael was. So I just tagged along for the ride, and we were going to see Commodore gaming. And if you remember them, they did these fantastic cases. They were PCs, but they were called Commodore Gaming, and they had beautifully airbrushed cases. I think they're out of business now. And we took a trip through, I think we went through Belgium for some reason. And we met up with the Hyperion guys, who Michael knew. That's Everett Carton and Ben Hermans. And they just found out that day they were being sued by Amiga Inc. So they weren't very happy. We bought them a drink. And I made the mistake of saying, if you ever need any help, give me a call. At the same time, I started writing articles for Amiga Future, for Total Amiga, sorry. And I got quite a collection of Amigas by this stage. And I said, wouldn't it be good if someone wrote an articles about the Amiga, the history of the Amiga models? And Robert said, yeah, that's a great idea, why don't you do it? So I started doing it. So I started writing the articles. I did 3, and then Total Amiga got transferred to Amiga Future, the German magazine, which wasn't going to have an English language version, just German, although all of the subscriptions transferred to Amiga Future. But within a few months, Andreas at Amiga Future says, hey, it seems your Amiga retrospective articles are quite popular, would you like to continue at Amiga Future? I said, yeah, that'd be okay. It ran for another 17 issues, and by the time the last issue was published, the Amiga retrospective, it talked about the AmigaOne X5000. Who would have believed through that period that I'd not only be writing the articles, I'd be actually involved in funding a new Amiga computer. And if you told me back in when I first met Michael in 2007, I wouldn't have believed you. But in 2011, end of 2011, 12, we had a new, and there's one sitting there in that white case, which runs very nicely, and I'm sure Alan will give you a demonstration if you want to see it. So by that stage, we started a new company, and Aeon Technology was formed. We had new computers. I still write for Amiga Future magazine. If you ever see them, it's called Classic Reflections, and it looks at all the companies, all the main companies, and the individuals who contribute to the Amiga's success. And it covers all sorts. In the current issue, it's just been released, you'll see part 1 of an interview with David Pleasance and Colin Proudfoot, who were the joint MDs of Commodore UK, and the concluding part will be in the next issue of Amiga Future. So that's how it's strange how these things happen. Yesterday, I can't believe it. I came from New Zealand last Sunday, went to Cardiff, had 2 days in Cardiff with the Amiga kid, went to London, had a night out with some Amigans. I do what Michael does now. I go and see Amigans wherever I go. I see bone balls wherever I go as well, but that's another thing. It's probably this. And then I went to Brussels. I met up with Hyperion, and I came back to London last night. In Brussels, I saw the Tabor board running the first ever release of AmigaOS 4.1 on the Tabor, was for the AmigaOne 1222. It's looking pretty good. I was pleasantly surprised and very pleased. So I'm here now today, and I'm ready to answer any questions you've got. You might not get sensible answers, but I'll do my best.
when you go to Poland?
Oh, right. I always go places where people invite me.
Okay,
So you invite me to Poland. You invite me to Poland. I've actually flown through Poland. I did a flying trip through Europe, and we landed in Gdansk. A few years ago. It's good.
Cool. I have a question about the new machine.
Yeah.
Who is the end user? And I know the answer. You said people who try to be different or like to be different. Is it true?
It's
still
actually what it is. It's quite surprising because the end users are usually people who've got who actually work in IT. You know, they might be running server farms. They might be maintaining equipment. It's usually people who are actually in the business already, and they come back and use their Amigas for relaxation, which is quite strange. You'd think they'd have enough computers working on it all week. So it is really, thank you very much. So it is really, most of them are people who are in the business. The demographics are very different. In the States, generally, the users are much older. They're more like me. But in Europe, especially Poland, Germany, for example, the UK, the users are much younger. The States, again, the users tended to have big box machines, whereas in Europe, they tend to be games machines, you know, the Amiga 500s, the 1200s. So obviously the X1000 and the X5000 are aimed at the top end, but the new machine, the A1222, is trying to aim back at the less expensive end to get it into hands of more users and grow the user base.
What kind of release date would the A1222?
Well, I would have said 2 years ago, as I said, because the motherboard's been ready for that long. But our hardware partners, Ultraviruses, and now they're building the production model. So the production model's got one or two minor changes, more to do with parts rather than anything else. And it's all now up to the beta testers, because in the next week or so, the next couple of weeks, the beta testers get their first ISO with an Amiga OS 4.1, Final Edition Update 1, 6, 7.2, whatever it is, and then it's up to the beta testers to put it through its paces. But hardware-wise, the Tabor board's been run by about 25 to 30 people with Linux, and it's been working very well. If you've seen it at various shows around the world or people talking about it, it's a nice piece of hardware. Yes, Alan.
So you mentioned AmigaOS a certain price for the Tabor. Is that staying like that, or has it changed?
The price is still under discussion with my business partner. As you know, I want to sell it at cost because I think the important thing is to get it out there and get more users, and then try to recover some of the costs with software, add-on software. To me, that makes sense, and I'm hopeful that's where we'll end up at.
Okay, how we can get more developers, because like you said, we have old community, and young guys can work harder.
Don't look at me when you say that.
No, I was looking somewhere here. But younger guys can work harder and have more time. Yeah?
It's true. What we find, when we talk about developers, obviously there is a development community out there. One thing that Aon has been working on is trying to get more developers involved, and Aon has about 20 developers who work, obviously not working full time, and they're obviously getting paid what I call Amiga rates. In other words, they do it for love. They get a little bit of payment. The payment may be in cash or in hardware. So we have a very active developer community. Obviously, AmigaOS has developers. There are AROS developers, there are Morphos developers. So I'm quite pleasantly surprised by the number of people who are still developing. And as David Pleasance will tell you, there are the surprising number of Amiga people in lots of fairly senior positions around the world, and they're coming back because of the retro market that's developing. And people have spare time, spare cash, and want to come back and contribute again and get involved. And that's what we're seeing more and more. But we need to bring in some younger people because we want to make sure that this continues and doesn't just die out with people like me with grey hair.
So I hear you say in the AmigaOS videos that the store is open source or open source and something.
What, AmiStore?
AmiStore?
AmiStore is runs on Amiga OS 4.1. You know. It's actually an application that runs. It just goes every time you start it. Goes to the web. It downloads any updates, and it's on your machine. It's not a web-based store. It's based on Hollywood. Having said that, AmiStore runs very nicely on the AmigaOS 4 Classic. It actually runs under WinUAE. But you can't actually buy it through WinUAE at the moment, unfortunately. Well, that's the next thing, because all the things we're doing with our software, the Enhancer software pack, which we introduced, we're going to do exactly the same for Classic. So all the Classic users will get OS 3.x versions of whatever's on the OS 4 where possible. And so there will be an AmiStore for the Classic users as well.
So what about ImageFX Aladdin? Because you get this stuff and
Yes, what we're keen to do is to. The first one we did was actually TuneNet. A lot of work on TuneNet, although that was always an OS 4 program. But Personal Paint, we've done a lot of updates to Personal Paint, and we produced a minimal viable product first, and we could do that with each of the software programs. So expect to see people working on those and updates coming out for them. But we've been concentrating most of our efforts, our developers, on all the applications that are in the Enhancer software pack. So the next one's going to be some of our other applications we bought. We bought them for that very reason, so that we can actually update the software, give it a modern interface, add some new features, and hopefully make some sales.
How many Commodore machines do you actually own?
Well, you know the answer because you've seen them. So I can't lie, can I? I own too many. It starts with the Kim one, which was the first, I suppose, the first one, first 8-bit born from Commodore, or MOS Technologies, which is Commodore. I've got a whole range of pets, all the pet series. I've got all the Tim series, I've got the 64 series. 8 bits, I would say, there's about 60. 16 bits is about 60. 32 bits is about 60. And I reckon it's about 200 altogether. So what I was thinking about doing was, rather than keep them stuck in my little museum, was to put them into the local museum as a micro homage to the micro age. Unfortunately, it's mainly Commodore, and next generation Amigas, and of course now my machines that Aeon's making.
Did you have a chance to meet or work with Jack Tramiel?
Right. No, you should ask one of our other guests here. Jack Tramiel, if you think about him, he left Commodore probably in 84. Yeah, so he was never part of my life. I never met him. All the stories about him are probably true, and I'm sure Dave can give you some stories later. And these stories are best told when you're having a few drinks and there's no cameras. And
this isn't recorded.
What about the other person in Commodore, Irving Gould?
Irving Gould. Now, Pitchfork, the Amiga retrospective. If you want to find out the whole story, you're not going to get all the juicy tidbits because they're always in people's heads, like David over there. But if you want a good feel about the history of Commodore from the day one, go and read that. It's free on Amiga Future's website. You can download each issue and you can actually read it. But Irving Gould was the money man behind Commodore, and he was like the VC that backed Jack Tramiel, how you don't say the eel, So someone told me, and he backed him from a typewriter company to a calculator company to a micro company, and so he was the money man behind the whole thing. And when he fell out of love with Commodore because it was no longer giving him the returns he wanted, he shut it down. So that's really what we can say about Irving Gould.
You mentioned Amiga Inc. So the website's still up.
Well, there's lots of Amiga Incs. Which one?
The Amiga.
Amiga.com.
Yeah. Well, it's Michael can chip in here if he wants as well. But Amiga Inc. They still exist.
As of today, they exist.
Yeah.
As of this afternoon, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I was in touch with Bill yesterday.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So when you will buy Amiga.com?
20 million.
He might answer it.
No,
Sorry.
Later, I'm told that
Yeah.
we exchange some words later.
Yeah.
I don't speak for Amiga Inc, but I have. Yeah.
You can't speak for Amiga Inc because he's not your
So the question was, Amiga Inc, can we buy them? The last time I asked about it was $20 million.
They will go down this patient.
My hair was black then.
What about the name Commodore? Because recently no one has
anyone within reason and money who has a business plan can go and license the Commodore name from the people that own it. Is it worth anything? It's worth something to some people. And as the years go by, then things lose value. I go to the States a lot, and I go to the shows in the States. And why you come to America? I'm going to an Amiga show. Well, what's an Amiga? So you've got to realise that things have a value and a time. I think Commodore name is probably worth something in Europe, and obviously the people that own the Commodore name believe that because they license it. And some people try to copy the Commodore name, and it's not legal even now.
So what do you think makes the Amiga so special?
I think it's the people. If you've watched the Viva Amiga movie, it's not a history about the Amiga computer and all the various models, and it doesn't go into great detail, but what it does talk about is the people and the passion. And I watch that movie and I feel kind of sad when I watch it, and then I feel happy and I feel sad, and I had black hair in that movie.
Yeah.
So dye's a wonderful thing, but I think it's the people. And I like the fact that I can go anywhere in the world in a group like this, and I can say preemptive multitasking, and you go, yeah. Or I can say custom chipsets, and you go, yeah, now you're talking, right? And it's anywhere else you go in the world, it's a Mac, it's a PC. The Mac world did not have a Mac 30th like we did. All these Amiga 30ths around the world, why did we have it? Why hasn't there been a PC 30th? There's something special about the people that are in this room and the people you meet all around the world, and we all have a common bond, and I can't explain it. I really can't explain it, but it's something that I used to watch. We must all remember the adverts, as a Think Different. That was Apple, wasn't it? Think Different. They always show a guy in the business suit who was the IBM guy, green and black screen, and they show this hip guy on his Mac. And I love the Dave Haney quote. Can I remember it? What's the quote from Dave Haney? Amiga makes Mac users look like PC users. I love that quote. So. Yeah. I've got time for one or two more questions.
So maybe again
Yeah, sure.
Why you bring Amiga back to us? And this is only your wish to make it real? Or do you have some business plan? Because, as you said, we have the Mac and PC, and there is still place for another player. Yeah,
that's a much bigger question, to be honest. In my other life, I'm a business angel, and so I work with lots of cool young companies, cool technology. One of them is here today. You saw Friendo. I'm a small investor in Friendo. I like technology. If you're asking me, can we make Amiga the way it was? I don't think we can the way we are. I sat down with some of the original developers, and we worked out it would take $10 million to at least attempt a small relaunch of the Amiga on a reasonable scale. I'm not taking worldwide scale. I prefer to do what I'm doing, which is servicing our retro and next-gen market, and hopefully building that slowly. Now, it would be a lot easier if we had
10 million.
10 million is not a big number in this type of business. It'd be a lot easier if we had a clearer picture of the IP, if we could put it all together again, because then you'd have a potential of a business plan, and then you'd be able to go to investors, and then you'd be able to clear up all of the confusion. But once you start talking about that, then the prices go up. The prices go up from the people who own the technology. It's human nature. So I'm not confident we can do that, but I'm confident we can do what we're doing and spread it expand it organically on a much smaller scale. And I quite like being, the retro geeky, cool people, rather than the Me Too, PC or Macs. But that's just me. One more question.
Do you think that Commodore could have been where Apple is today? Could we call like Commodore Book?
But Commodore, Apple were like this.
I know
Commodore was like this.
But we're talking about those.
Yeah. Could it have been? Yes, of course it could have been. And if you talk to David, David's got lots of views on that, because obviously he was with a division of Commodore that was very successful, and it could have been taken forward. In reality, there's only, it's not 3 platforms, isn't there? Because Android is a multi-platform operating system that works everywhere. But in reality, in terms of what we talk about Commodore, there are 2 main industry players. There's all the IBM clones, who still have most of the market, despite what Apple might think. And you've got the Apple PCs. But then, of course, you've got these, which everyone's got now, and the kids have them, and the tablets. And the technology has changed so much in the last 30 years. It's just unbelievable, the speed that's changed. And the fact that kids, 2-year-olds can pick these up and start swiping them. That we've changed the way we interact with the world through the internet. And you've got to realise the internet only started effectively in 1995. So in a very short time, we've seen a whole sea change in social interaction with technology. It's not all for the good either, but we have seen this change. So now we have Snapchat presidents. Who can, and we're not too far away. Maybe we have all our polls on Snapchat. Should I do this policy? Yes or no? Yeah, okay, yes, we'll do it. So that's a much more deeper philosophical question. But I'm just happy to be an Amigan. I'm happy to be among Amigans, celebrating the Amiga 500's 30th birthday with Amiga friends. So thanks very much.
It was AMIcast, podcast for all Amiga users.